So here we are in Jane's studio. What were you doing out here? What were you working on?
Well, I'm working on some painting, but I was also cleaning up. So,
Where are you?
yeah, I've been working on some oils and some 12 by 12 oils. Did that.
It's pretty awesome. And then you're going to have, you're part of the studio tour in April, so you got to get all ready for that as well.
Yeah, actually, yes. It's not the reason
You're
I'm
not
cleaning.
there yet? Oh.
Well, it's not the reason I'm cleaning up the studio. There was a few things I couldn't find, but I
see.
used it to.
Okay. All right.
It's a good example of spending some time decluttering.
Yeah. Well, we're videoing this on Sunday afternoon. It's almost dinner time, and look outside, and it's really cold. Now, that cold is coming up from south of the border, but there's also another kind of cold that's come up south of the border, Jane, and I thought we should talk about tariffs. Now, there's no way we are experts on tariffs or whatever, but we do read the news. I talk to a number of economists about it, but also you talk to agencies and others, and we speak to media representatives. But it's pretty clear that what's coming is going to be stark. That's what we're being told. And I think of all the stuff that we've been through over the years. Like we first started at the food bank in the recession in the 80s, right? And then we had other recessions. And then we had the Great Recession. And at that point, I was in Parliament and you were having to handle things back here at the food bank. So that was an adjustment. And then comes the pandemic, which is another whole big adjustment. But now there's this, and this one seems different. There's almost kind of a violence to it. I find that there's other things. It's just been because we couldn't get the economy right or whatever it is, or because of a pandemic. This one seems to be human generated, and we've been announced that it's coming. But, I think that's almost all that you and I have been talking about in the last week is this pandemic and what we're going to do. How does it strike you? You're down at the food bank working with the volunteers. I'm more out in the community. But how does it strike you? And have the volunteers been talking about it?
Well, of course, volunteers have been talking about it.
Yeah.
More just in terms of, but last week, whether it was coming or not coming, and just obviously the uncertainty around. But it definitely looks like it's coming now. I think how it strikes me, I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen overall. We don't know how deep and how far the impact will go and how long-standing, obviously, in terms of what's going to happen. But definitely, whether it's politically people are mobilizing to really, whether it's a trade war or Team Canada is being assembled to try to fight it off. If what they say is true, particularly in some of the auto sector and the food sector in particular, if hundreds of thousands of jobs are going to be lost, then that's definitely going to impact food banks around our food bank, but obviously food banks around the country, food banks particularly in Ontario. I think regardless what's going to happen, I know the food industry is going to be particularly affected by this, and what does that mean? We don't know. The start of the pandemic happened, and we actually got a lot of food because it couldn't be sold and other things, and that's not the kind of opportunity we want. But obviously, food banks will be at the forefront of trying to make sure, for instance, there's not a lot of food going to waste with others. But the job losses and people coming to us is going to be incredibly difficult as well. So I think that kind of scares me a little bit, because I think it's just not a recession and you get out of it. This feels like institutional and wholesale change, and a lot of the pacts people have spent years working towards just are basically are done. So
seems to me in the 4 decades that we've been there, when I think of the first recession in the 80s, there was people that were kind of falling through the cracks, right? And so food banks were born at that moment to help, because it was a recession, it was difficult. But then governments never quite came back to that and fulfilled those responsibilities of social programs and others. And over the years, it's gotten worse and worse. So more and more people, as a result, who are falling through have been coming to food banks. So we've seen this increase for years and years and years. And especially since the pandemic, there have been real struggles there as well because of inflation, grocery prices, and other things. But you just get this impression that during that same time, when more and more people, so right now we have 7.1 million people food insecure in the country, 2.1 million kids food insecure. But this has all been happening at a time when our economy is supposedly rolling. right? GDP is maybe the highest in history. There's been all these great things. So there seems to be this separation between where our economy is at and where average people live. And the reason why I bring that up is this whole thing about the tariffs is going to really affect both of those areas, right? Not just average people trying to get by or whatever it is. I think businesses are going to be hard, maybe especially in the auto sector, is what they're saying. That's where most of the jobs they'll think will go by the wayside. But also with food in the agricultural sector, 80% of the food that we grow here in Ontario goes south of the border. So what happens with that? So it seems to me that this is not like the first food drive where you have a few people that are falling through the cracks, but really the rest of the system's okay. We're now at a place right now where economically we might have been strong, but the social system itself was frayed. And we're getting hit with this at that time. And I worry about that. I think I told you a few days ago when we were having coffee in the morning before you went to the food bank, I just have this feeling something is going to happen. And I have no idea what it is. And that's the problem. Economists don't fully know. Politicians don't. It could even be true the President of the United States doesn't know what's going to happen. In fact, there is an opinion on that. But it seems to me that as a food bank that's already swamped, 6,000 families a month, right? 40 other agencies that we're helping. It's not catching at us at a time, I think, when things are going up and up and getting better and better. It's catching us at a time when we have been taking on more of the load within the community. And I really worry about that. I don't know what that means, but what we did learn in the pandemic is that whatever happens economically, people still want to take part in helping out at the food bank, right?
Yeah, people want to help out, and the food bank continues to be the community response to whatever's kind of going on. So, whether it's more people coming in down and helping when they can, whether it's the people obviously making donations as to whatever level. I think we continue to be in that sweet spot where people who want to help and people who need the help come in through the food bank, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, we are an expression of the community. And I think that doesn't scare me, because I think our community has shown over 40 years that they step up. But I think the overall thing scares me in terms of just what's actually going on. And food banks were never meant to be a secondary food system, which is kind of what seems to be more and more happening. So I don't know. I do know the volunteers that are down there. Whenever. The great thing about being at the food bank is you got people from all political stripes and people from
faiths,
cultures, and all those kind of things. And it's kind of a meeting place. And so people talk about those things with respect. When it comes to difference of opinions, they basically really try to discuss things when there's time to discuss things.
Yeah, it's busy down there.
In a very good way. So I think that's helpful to feel like you're actually doing something to help people who need it. But the bigger picture, I don't know. We always talk about the environment. Think global, act local. The food bank is the local part of it, but the global stuff, it's definitely discouraging.
So we've been talking with other food banks in the province, and then I think it's week after next you and I have to go down.
We're going down to talk about it more.
To talk with other food banks, because although we've been situated fairly well because we're pretty diversified in where our supplies come from and where the funds come from, others have not been so fortunate. So we're all having to meet and figure out how are we going to handle the tidal wave, or perhaps the tidal wave that's coming in our direction. And it's true that, food is shared across Canada amongst food banks and from companies and others as well through Food Banks Canada, through a food sharing system. It's also true that here in Ontario, we have something similar. But I think there is just the feeling that as the food banks draw together, some of these food banks, and I just talked about it last week, are down 20-25% in donations, right? Others are now having to ration. So once again, this is not coming when the food banks are doing great. This is coming when they're really being challenged. Yeah. So it's going to be difficult. And you and I are going to have to be at those meetings and talk through and see what food banks will do. I know you talk with the other food banks as well, because you're on one of the committees for the provincial group for Feed Ontario. What do you think their mood is like?
That's a really good question, because I think they're kind of all reeling as well.
Yeah.
I do think that after the pandemic, lots of studies were done which basically told food banks, yes, your numbers are going to double, but after the pandemic's over, they're not going to go down. That in many ways, people who have lost their jobs are not going to find other work. It's just, there was just a difference. So they were starting to do studies in terms of what they thought the impact just would be generally on food banks and how things were going. And this is a whole other level. This was before tariffs were announced and all, this is before Trump won. So, we were going to be talking more about those issues, but this, of course, trumps all of that. And so I think we as larger food banks in Ontario have meet virtually 3-4 times a year and talk about sort of some of the big picture stuff. And this was one you guys, we got to see you.
We got to be together.
We got to be together. So we're heading down to Mississauga in a couple of weeks, as you say, and then the conference, the annual conference, will be around this as well. So I think it's tough. I think for us, we look at ourselves and we look at the food bank and the London community, and we know that we can handle it. But we are one amongst a number, and I think it's the system that matters. So I think it's good to be able to go and talk and see what's going on and see what we can do.
So really, for the folks that are watching this video, or folks in the community, we're just like you, we have no idea what's coming. But if these tariffs do go through and last for any length of time, there will be a restructuring beginning to take place in the country. And at that time, it's going to be easy for people to feel despair and not being quite sure what to do. But we've never had that at the food bank. We've always had people always willing to donate. We've always had the volunteers and others that are coming down. But we as a community have to find that solution. We're not in Ottawa. You're not in Ottawa. We're not in Queen's Park. But we can, as a community, come together and find ways to help one another. And I really think this is what we're calling on you for here. It's not so much just for the food bank, but we help all these other agencies. And if they're having trouble already before even this comes on, it's going to be hard. And they're going to look to the food bank for help. And, we're looking to you for help as well. This is not a plea for donations or anything else, because you've been so generous. But as we move through these very difficult waters and strong headwinds over the next while, we'll keep you posted on how it's going. We know the volunteers will come down there, as they always did. It doesn't matter. They're always there, and we love London that way. But I think we have to develop a kind of community response, much like we did around homelessness and trying to find ways of doing it, and that has not been easy. But when it comes to food security, and when you consider the price of food and other things and costs of rent, it's going to be really hard for people just to survive this. And we as a food bank want to be there. We're ready. We have a board meeting this week in which Jane and I are going to tell them what we're set. We're ready to go. This is a challenge. It's what we're here for. Let's do what we can to help people, but also other agencies. Now, I say that, and people get a little smile on their face and saying, well, Glen, that's great you feel that way, Glen. Do you?
Yeah, I feel ready for any kind of challenge that's there. I think we're made to hit it head on. I think it's because in many ways we might talk about the big picture, but we know the big picture isn't going to be solved by us. But we're citizens, we're individuals, we're in families, we're in neighborhoods, we're in associations, and I think we can all come together and make a difference to try to take care of the people around us. So whether it's the neighborhoods or even the kids coming back home, whatever it is, I think whatever the unit is, I think to get back to some of those neighborhood things, I think is incredibly important, and community. So we talk, because we're at the food bank, we talk about the big London community, but the London community is made up of a number of different agencies. The London community is made up of all these associations, and I think, life gets so hard, but it requires us to kind of step up and just do what we can.
Yeah, I think if we feel ready for the challenge, it's not because we're brave or anything else. It's because we've had years of this and many challenges. But the community has always had our back, and that's great. But I will say, in all those other challenges, we always felt, maybe the pandemic was a little different, but we always felt that we know the course that we're going on. We know what we have to do. But this time, it feels like people have lost the map. We don't really know what direction things are going to go in. We can't count on the past as a lesson for how we can get out of this as far as policy and economics and other things. But always what happened in the past was the community came together. Always, every situation. And especially during the pandemic we saw it. So you're going to have to do that again, and it's because through us you're going to be able to help all those other organizations, but also we all have to make a statement of faith, as we do in you and you do in us. It's really true that this is going to be a very unique challenge for all of us. There's going to be a lot of people hurting really bad, and it's just time we showed up. So I just think from both of us as to the community, thanks for all that you've done, and thanks for how you're going to help us guide through all of this. And I'm going to let you get back to your painting.
Thank you.